Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Maybe I'm Just Not Getting It. I'm your podcast host, Robert Davis. Thank you so much for tuning in. Before we get started on the episode, just per the usual, just want to take a minute to plug myself. Follow the podcast or the episodes are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. If you listen to any different medium for your podcast, just let me know and I can try to see about getting it put up on there as well. Follow me on Instagram at RTD underscore III and follow me on Facebook at Robert Trey Davis III. Sometimes I post stories or polls or anything regarding to the podcast, different questions regarding episodes coming up or topics. And so, just if you opportunities to engage further that way. Definitely appreciate everybody support so far. I appreciate you all tuning in. Your feedback, everything really means a lot. And so with this episode, I know I kind of go on these rants sometimes, so I apologize because this is definitely one. It's a little bit kind of sporadic, jumbled type of thought, but something I want to talk about because I hear about it a lot, especially like when I'm scrolling through social media or I'm hearing younger people talk, and it's really talking about the importance of education. I think that there's a lot of criticism over the importance of formal education in today's media and culture, and I think understandably so to a degree. I mean, I do think that especially like I'm not going to go too deep in the concept of like high school versus college or anything like that here, but like I do understand when some people say college is a scam. I don't believe college is a scam. Like the work that I do that ties in directly to the both my undergraduate and my graduate degree, um, or my doctorate degree, I guess technically you want to call it that. But not only as well as that, the I do believe that my college education from North Carolina A&T was 100% preparing me for the world in more ways than just my working in a field. But also, I do understand and I do know many examples of where people went to college for one reason. I mean, and for one reason or the other, maybe it was that the major they picked was not in a competitive field or was not in a growing field, or maybe it was that where they were was not in a competitive market or a growing market, or that the program didn't have the rigor that they thought it was going to have, or any variety of reasons. And so I do understand like that criticism. I do even understand it from just a basic grade school level where people say, oh, you know is this something that we're going to use in real life? Do I really need to know how to solve for X in terms of paying my bills? And like, yes, I do think you do. But to make a long story short, but it's just something I kind of want to talk about because even though I do understand the criticisms of it, I do think it's kind of shallow. But I do also, again, I understand where it comes from. I think there's a generational shift in what is seen as important or what is seen as paths to success, and schooling or formal education in a sense, or even informal education even too. I think really what scares me to a degree, and I'm sorry I'm getting off topic, is that I think the generational shift is more than just formal education. It's this concept that education in general is like you're doing too much, or it's to learn something in the sense of a proper way or of a real way, other than just listening to somebody say something and making your own opinion based off of that, is kind of seen as just an old school method nowadays. And I think that is problematic, and it has many of fault or potential downfalls that come with it. And I do think it's unfair to blame this just on schooling alone, mainly because, and like, had a lot of educators in my family. I was never taught that school was supposed to teach you everything about life. Like school was supposed to give you, I guess, your basic kind of fundamental educational blocks to build upon, especially grade school level. But I think there's a expectation that schooling is supposed to give you all life skills, where I don't understand how it would. Like, and I'm gonna get into some of the examples, but like one thing I hear a lot is like taxes. Like, oh, they didn't teach us about taxes in school. I mean, you have to know math to know taxes. Technically, they have the instructions, and technically, filling out a 1040 is nothing but matching the number on what you receive from your job to the box number on the form, which is stated in the instructions that come with the form. But reading is comprehend. I mean, it is essential. But a lot of people don't read past the fifth grade level or want to read. But again, we'll get into that. But I do think that it's kind of unfair to blame schooling in a general base because it was never meant for, I think, everything that people think. And there's just so many other avenues and free resources and extra education that people can seek out easily that it just makes me kind of think, like, is it really that schooling failed or you just failed yourself, you know? And I also think it just speaks partially to our culture being contrary for no reason. And I don't think it's contrary for no reason. I think it's quite frankly the job of the younger generation to criticize what has been in place. And I don't mean like this particular younger generation. I just think that's just a concept of human nature. Like the younger generation is always going to come and criticize and what is in place before them and say, "Hey, look, we don't think this is necessary, or we think that this is outdated." Some of it's going to be right, some of it's going to be wrong, but I do think that that's just kind of part of it. But it is a kind of just a point of how it's happened. But in talking of like why does this matter, at least to me, is that I think to the point of just stated, there's a growing notion that education is unimportant or that it is not required for success. And I just don't think that that is true. I do think that there is an increased pathway for people to be successful without being educated. And I don't think that being educated means that you're going to be successful. Like, just to be clear, like, but at the same time, I think that when you talk about the building blocks to success or making yourself out in a way to become successful, that is always seen as one of the steps to get there. And I do agree with that. But there is, and to the point that we just spoke about, there is this unrealistic expectation that school is supposed to explain everything to you. You know, and a lot of times when I hear people talk about some of the things that they wish, oh, school didn't teach me, you know, proper house planning, you know, proper budgeting, proper prioritizing of responsibilities, life planning. That's not school's job. School's job was to teach you how to count, how to how to do algebra, how to do geometry, it would teach you history, it would teach you how to read. Well, you know, like that, but that's not. And so I think there's just a misunderstanding of what the purpose of school is compared to what the purpose of life education is. Whether that life education comes from, you know, your community, comes from your faith-based organization, comes from your volunteer-based organization, comes from your family, comes from your friends, comes from anything like that. It's not just all based upon school. Or it comes from after school curricula, you know, sports, whatever. It's not all based upon school though. And most well-educated people, when you ask them what, you know, the experience that they've had, what things they went through, none of them say it's all solely on school. So that's just, I guess, where I kind of get confused about that. I guess that expectation that was supposed to teach us everything, but I think also that it's kind of a laziness thing, right? Like if I didn't know and I didn't have the want within me or the wherewithal to go look, then I just say, oh, well, that was never taught to me, when really it was on you to teach yourself. But the other thing is that most careers, I mean, and to the point we say most careers and jobs, especially the high performing ones, and I'm not just talking about like your top jobs, like your CEOs and all that stuff, but even if you want to be things like a veterinarian, if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be a construction worker, if you want to be any sort of specific job that gets paid, you know, you have to have some sort of education, whether that be a degree, whether that be a training, whether that be a certification. It has to be something. Like, you can be a forklift driver and have your CDL. I believe it's your CDL. I might be misspeaking on that one. But, that would still be a certification that would be required for that position. You can be a lot of, I mean, you don't have to go to college per se, but you do have to obtain a certification or a training that will require education still. And I think people think that that's not, that's not the case, but it's like, yeah, either way, you're going to be educated. When you get on a job, when you get a job, most of the time they're going to train you, and you're going to learn, policies, procedures, terminology, all sort of things that is specific to that particular field or that particular organization. And that is nothing but, education. Like, you have to learn. Like, so to think that you don't, or to think that it's not necessary, and if you like, and some of the things that you're going to be taught there is going to be based upon things that they're going to assume that you knew from school, or that you knew from, I guess, a general background of education. And I think, to the point of that, education is more than just book smarts, and we know that. Excuse me. Education is, to the point where I was just talking about, how just the things that it required is more than just a degree. Like, a degree is essentially, in my opinion, just a certification saying that you are, or you're expert in this particular field, or you have this particular set of knowledge in this particular field. But that's, I mean, so it's more than just that, because it can be your technical knowledge on how, like, to work with a particular program, or to work with a particular application. It can be trade skills. It can just be common sense and street smarts. But education comes, like, people, oftentimes I hate when I see people say, "Oh, well, I was a horrible student in school, and I can show you that school doesn't matter because I'm successful now." And I'm like, "Yeah, but you learned other things to make yourself successful. Like, you didn't just go through that same base level of knowledge and understanding of the world and achieved what you achieved. Like, you got it from somewhere else." So I can understand saying formal education didn't work for me, so I can understand it not working for everybody. Yeah, sure, I agree with that. But to say education in general doesn't matter, and I think it promotes this false narrative and this false message that a lot of people think, "Oh, it's easy and I don't need this." And yeah, you do. And just to be real about it, people are not obtaining the basic life skills necessary for being an adult anymore. And whether that is financial literacy, in the basic sense of just being able to know how much money you have coming in compared to how much money you have going out. Whether that be things such as just, if your car breaks down, who to call, how to schedule a doctor's appointment, you know, like things that school would not teach you, but some you would have to learn from somewhere. Like, these sort of life skills are just kind of falling because people don't believe they're not educating themselves. And I get it, but we can't all just say, "Well, it was never taught to me. Nobody ever showed me." Because, like, nobody taught me how to use Instagram. But I went and did it. Nobody taught me how. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of things people do just by picking it up and trying it, or reading, or like, and nobody taught me how to make a podcast. I just kind of sat down and did it. It doesn't mean that there wasn't resources out there to learn how to do it, but I did. I just sat down and did it. And so I think we have this concept where people have to be more willing to embrace their own education, and willing to embrace taking steps to ensure that they are, and not just say, "Oh, well, it wasn't provided to me," because nothing will be provided to you. Like, people don't owe you anything. And I think a lot of times, especially this younger generation, they feel like somebody owes them something, and they never will. Like, but some of the, like, I guess, examples, and to the point, we talked about this already, but the losing the basic skills is definitely, like, things like counting money is a big one for me. Like, I remember when I remember going to this. I was going to the store one time, and I got some stuff, and just like, I remember I gave the dude, I forget how much it was, the dude that was the cashier working, but it might have been like $4.30 or something like that, and I gave him a $5 bill. and it was $4.34. Yeah, because the 66 cent in change was just $4.33, 67 cent. I remember this now. The 67 cent in change was just kicking this guy's ass. Like he could not count it. Like he could not. He handed me back 50 some cent and was like, "Hey, I need you to hey, count it. Let me know if if this is right. If not, just let me know and I'll give you what you're owed." And I'm just looking at him like, bro, like how the hell you get the job as the cashier if you can't count money? Like he was trying. Like it wasn't like he just looking was like apathetic. Like he was trying. Like 50, 55, like, and I'm just trying to figure out how do you even get to that point? Like, especially in a society where we are so money loving and money based, and money is the kind of like the root and motivation for all things. How do you not know how to count money? Like that should be basic. But I mean, just other things like basic analytical skills. People, I mean, don't use basic analytical skills that they would be taught through school. Just how to read, comprehend, and understand. Read and comprehend a fact pattern or a letter, a fact pattern, anything, and be able to answer questions based off that. Be able to analyze a question, go back and be able to pull the information you need and get what you, I mean, and be able to determine a right answer. Like people struggle with that now because it's not something that they practice or they do enough through because they don't believe it's necessary, and it's just skills that are eroding. Um, the ability to read clocks, the ability to know like if something happens, who to call. Like people know that there's things out there, but they don't know who to call. Like like beyond just saying, "Oh, my car breaks down. I know it needs a mechanic," but like I wouldn't know how to call a mechanic. I wouldn't know anything about my car to say what's going on. If I needed to schedule like a doctor's appointment, I wouldn't know what's going on with that. If every electronic in my house was off, I would not know how to be able to tell the time in my house. Like these sort of things where it's just like basic life stuff are going out the window. General facts and general knowledge about stuff. Like, and I know sometimes people laugh about things on, I mean, sometimes videos and stuff that we see online are exaggerations or parodies of, things that are actually going on in the world. But people don't know a lot of basic stuff. Somebody online was talking about how they did not know every country had a national flag. Like we got black people that don't know about Emmett Till, that don't know about Ruby Ridges, that don't know about basic civil rights history. And it just speaks to this concept of, with some like, and we'll sit there and say, well, nobody taught us that, and the school didn't teach us that. But like, you had every opportunity to learn it. And the things that we also say that school neglects, so just in my opinion, or formal education neglects, in my opinion, aren't things that they were supposed to be providing. So like some of the things that I've noted was like people say, well, it didn't teach me how to buy a home. How would that have been applicable to a teenager? For one. For two, how am I going to teach you about interest rates and teach you about a down payment, teach you about mortgages, and teach you about how to budget your money to be able to pay that if you don't know basic math skills? That requires you to solve for X, quite frankly. Like, so, like, how would you be able to do that? How would you, like, taxes? Again, I go back to that. People talk about, well, yeah, I don't understand how taxes work. Well, I mean, there's plenty of free resources out there to determine that. Well, yeah, but nobody taught me how to fill out, how to do my taxes. I mean, it's an instruction on the form. Do you need a class to read the instruction to you? Like, or you go to the IRS website, they have even more instruction on how to do the form. And so, it's like people say, well, it didn't teach me how to be responsible. How would it do that? It didn't teach me life priorities. How would it do that? School job is not to teach you what priorities you have in life. School job is to make you educated so that you can be able to use those skills to be able to create a future for yourself. Like it's not teaching you, oh, you need to learn how to balance your priorities. I mean, to a degree it does, because if you have classes, you got different work to do. It teaches you that through that way, balancing social life with extracurricular activities, with school activities, and through that. But how else would it teach you that? You know, how else, could it teach you financial literacy beyond just the most basic of steps when it's not applicable to you in that point in your life? And I just think, it's a lot of kind of blaming of it on things that I just don't understand where the expectation was to begin with. And like we criticize like a lot of things, such as like algebra and geometry. And I get that, like, I go back to that. Like, people are like, oh, well, when will you ever need to know what an obtuse angle is? Or when would you ever need to know how to solve for a variable or a Pythagorean theorem or anything like that? But this is the basis of a lot of jobs, white collar, blue collar. Like, you have to know angles in order to work construction, because you have to be able to know how to line certain things up, or be able to know what structures can support what things at what angle. Like, that's basic architecture. That's basic construction. You have to be able to sometimes know what chemicals or what factors or what things are mixing, or what, elements you have, because they can be reactive. That's the basis of most jobs. Accounting and math, like, if you work in any sort of business function, you have to know that. Most jobs need to teach you how to read a particular amount. Even if you like working at a warehouse, you still have to be able to read and be able to understand where it is you're going, how many pallets you're moving. Like, it no people, I think this expectation of everything is just like, you don't need skills for these jobs, and I'm just like, yeah, you do. But I think, the other part of it is reading and literature as well. Like, we talk about how, like, oh, people, we don't need to some of the books are outdated, or, reading this type of printed works and stuff like that is a waste of time. And like, what we fail to understand is that, reading helped us comprehend, helps us analyze, it helps us be able to um, not think for ourselves, but be able to develop, different, um, not priority, but different viewpoints, different perspectives, be able to help broaden our minds. And like now, and it's been this way, but more than 50% of people don't read past an elementary grade school level. And I think that can be directly attributed to a lot of people don't read. Like, they didn't like reading and they never embraced it. But beyond reading a meme or a 1 minute article on the internet, that's the only reading that they do. And how can we grow intellectually if that's, our basis? Um, and the thing that kind of pisses me off about that is that we criticize, our schooling, especially our emphasis on stuff like science and math. But the countries that are openly like lapping us in education and lapping us in getting, people out there to be in these high performing jobs, your doctors, your lawyers, your engineers, your managers, your directors, all these different things, they're coming from especially from outside of the country. They're, these countries like China and India, the main thing that they focus on is science, technology, engineering, and math. They focus on STEM, the same things that we say aren't required, or the same thing that we say not aren't required, the same things that we say are not important or nobody will use. And so I say that to say, how can we make such a double-edged statement to be like, well, it's not important, or, you're never going to have to use this, but yet a country that is lapping us in education and putting out, people that are going into high paying jobs in science, technology, engineering, math, art, business, all across the world, and being able to, do things and be leaders and shakers in society, movers and shakers in society. They are practicing and they are emphasizing these things. Like their country's educational basis is emphasizing these things. So why would we think that it's not important? And it comes back to this thing of where I talk about the rise of anti-intellectualism, which is really also kind of like the rise of ignorance. But anti-intellectualism, to make a long-sounding word, kind of a short definition, is really just the concept of not being a society that does not think. So a society that does not think and a society that does not know anything anymore because they do not think. And that's where I kind of also mix that in with the ignorant part, because like that is where we are, where a lot of people do not read, a lot of people do not understand, a lot of people do not know. And so therefore they can be told anything. They can be given false facts. They can be conned easily, because they when your independent thought is based upon no fact outside of just your subjective opinion of things, and your subjective opinion of things is based upon nothing other than just your literal independent thought, no providing facts, no providing education, no providing building blocks to build that off of, then yes, you can be easily manipulated. And yes, you can be easily misconstrued into anything. And we're at, or you can be easily controlled because people can tell you that, oh, this isn't true, or this is how things are going to go, and you're just going to believe it because you don't know any better. How would you have, like, you've never stressed that part of your brain to even figure it out. And it gives also to this point of a rise of opinion and character compared to what I would say is credentials and intelligence. And we see this a lot. Trump is a big point of that, but a lot of politicians nowadays, a lot of people in positions of power nowadays are a point of that, where it's the opinion and and character thing is something where it's like you see streamers, influencers, celebrities in these roles where they're in like real life roles, like Linda McMahon as the chair of Department of Education, or RFK Jr. as the chair of Human Health Services. Like, you see, I mean, and there's actually bigger celebrities, actually known people, but you see people that don't have the qualifications for these jobs put into these positions. And it's because of who they are compared to what they know or what they bring to the table. And Elon Musk, even like with where he was in the Doge thing before him and Trump fell out, like that sort of rise in characters and positions over people that are actually credentialed or have the knowledge to be there comes from that anti-intellectualism. Like, we don't value that. Like, yeah, you may know what you're doing, but I like them. Like, I relate to that. I like them. We relate so much to something because it's easy. It helps turn our brain off. But I think we have to get back to, and we want, and it's almost like kind of in the sense, I'm not going to get too far into that. Politics is kind of lined up to being like entertainment now, and we got to get back to separating those two out. Like, politics can't be entertaining. It has to be something that's boring. You want the boring people that know what they're doing, but you're not trying to entertain a crowd. Like, that's what you need politics to be, because that's when good things get done, in my opinion. But yeah, this concept of just like the characters over those with actual credentials or information to be there is a dangerous line that we're walking down. But it does, again, bounce back to where when people see that, they're like, yeah, see, you don't need to be educated. You don't need to do that you don't need to get this degree or certification to do this. You can just do it. See what they did. And it just kind of undermines the whole process, especially when there's not most of the time the accurate understanding of the actual situation. And so the concerns that I have regarding it, other than the ones I've already stated to a degree, is that First, that we rather complain about things, that we rather complain about things that we don't know instead of trying to educate ourselves. And like, people talk about, oh, well, like I said, no one taught me, budgeting, but there's plenty of, there's apps for budgeting, there's literature for budgeting, there's social media platforms or pages and all that for budgeting, for financial literacy, for for these things that we say that, oh, we don't know or no one taught us. If I don't know how, no one taught me the concepts of buying a house, but there are plenty of things online that will give you every bit of information on that. I do internet research on things all the time when I want to know about it. Book research, all sort of things, because that information is out there. You just have to be willing to get it. And we rather complain that somebody is not giving it to us than going to get it ourselves. But the question is, why would somebody give it to us? Like, we can't expect that. Whether that's that it wasn't given to us out of just erroneous, it wasn't part of it, or it's not applicable to it, or if it was a more devious or malcontent sort of intent to it, then either way, we still have to circumvent that by getting that information for ourselves. And back to what I was saying before, that a lot of things I feel like that we complain about that are not taught in schools or through formal education. It's not its role to teach it, or it's not something that it focuses on. And I think when you're trying to train, or when you're trying to incorporate or educate young minds, you have to stick within a certain scope that they can understand. And when you start getting outside of that scope, they'll start checking out because it's just not applicable to them. And like, people always say, well, especially our age, in the lower to mid 30s, that, oh, the original recession hit, man, I should have bought a house when I was 11. And we turned that into a joke, but more people think, well, yeah, they should probably teach, how to buy houses and all that, and, home loans and mortgages and all that stuff as part of school. But when you were 16, did you give a shit about that? No, it wasn't something that was applicable to you. Whether it was whether you would have known it was the only time that was going to be affordable for you or not, like, it would not have mattered. And so I think that's, just a common sense fact that we have to kind of embrace, that a lot of people don't. And to the point I was already saying, people don't take advantage of the educational system. Well, they don't take advantage of educational resources to assist them with things that they say that they need assistance with. And like I said, I've beaten that horse to death, but there's plenty of things online for almost everything that we need. There's plenty of resources online through social media, through independent like websites, literature, workbooks, everything to help. And so I don't believe people when they just, say like they feel like something failed them and, oh, I just never learned that, because you had every opportunity to. You just chose not to. And, there's a growing notion that you don't need these education or training or certification for these jobs, for high paying, or not for high paying jobs, but for kind of like, I won't say important jobs, because I don't believe in unimportant to a degree, but for jobs that would require it, like even with like the veneer techs, when that whole thing was going on, like somebody just said, oh, you know what, I'm gonna just start doing dentistry work without a license, because you don't really need a license to be a dentist. That's just them trying to get some money out of you. But license, how you tell that you certified, you went to dentistry school. Like, I'm an attorney. I have, like, my license means that I know the law and I practice it. That's why I don't argue with people about what the law is, because I know the law. You don't, and I know the law. I have a license saying that I know the law. I'm not going to sit there and waste my time with that, with people that don't. Like, it's a concept, that I think that people think, oh yeah, I'm gonna run a daycare and I'm not gonna realize, oh, I didn't realize we had to have, a permit for that. or I'm going to run a food business out of my house and never look up anything about how to properly store food or what I'm cooking or what I need for it, and then get mad that, oh, no one told me that I needed a license, or I need a license, I need a certification to be publicly serving food or publicly selling food to people. But you had every opportunity to look that up. And just like, I don't want to sound cold hearted about that, but that's part of the educational process. We can't blame the world around us for being like, oh, school should have taught me that. School should have taught me the business steps that I need to succeed in life. No, I mean, you have to look that up. You have to make yourself aware. And it's like we're losing a common sense notion on how the world works. And so the internet is not going to be the trainer for everything. Like, there's instructional videos out for everything. It's a great resource, but within it in itself is not going to be your literal, like, only trainer for everything that you're doing. Everything's not going to be either through the internet or like through a do-it-yourself type of function. Like, we do need people that are actually trained and instructed in particular roles. Like whether that be something as kind of peculiar as like some people that are trained to when you go, like, what's the thing, skydiving, the people that are trained to hold on, make sure that you're safe and everything like that, whether it's something like that compared to whether it is construction workers that are properly trained on safety hazards and how to safely operate within a work zone or work site. That is all important. And if we lose just like this common sense notion of how the world works and how these things work, then we start losing those the concept of even understanding those things, in my opinion. And if we are not, if we stay in this mode of kind of wanting to be dumb in a sense, then we set ourselves up to be easily controlled and easily manipulated. And I see this with the MAGA thing a lot. And I'm not going to go too deep into Trump or anything in this one. But like we see that a lot where you have some people now who are kind of like regretting their choice. And they're just like, oh, I didn't realize, the full magnitude or gravity of what I was embracing or what I was voting for. And you were easily controlled or manipulated. But if you had been more educated in what was going on, and not be like, oh, if you paid attention to school, but if you would just like research the things that was going on around you that you were trying to embrace, or you say that you were in support of or not in support of, then we would be in a better position, or at least you would be in a better position to feel like you can more justify or stand by whatever it is that you stood by. So in conclusion, like, education, it provides us the building blocks for, I believe, the building blocks to be successful in terms of general knowledge of the world around us, and pertinent things such as math, science, English, history, like things that we need to know as human beings, and especially to succeed at a higher level in the world. But it doesn't mean that it will teach us everything. Education is more than just what you learn in a classroom, and it doesn't stop there. And I think sometimes we think that it's supposed to stop there, but education is a continual process, and it's an individual process. Like, you have to seek it out, and you have to continually seek it out. And I think just the fall of society always, in my opinion, begins with the people not being able to do for self. And when you're in that position, whether it's through, recession, apathy, anti-intellectualism, whatever the case may be, that's always seems to be the first part of it to me, is that when you're not able to when you're not able to make those decisions and make those educated choices, those educated decisions, those educated analyses, by on your own, or as a, I guess, as a people, then that's when you open yourself up to being controlled. You open yourself up to being manipulated. You open yourself up to being abused or misused. And the only way that we will fight that is by remaining educated. When you know the world around you, it is harder for people to get things over on you. So I I'll stop ranting now because I could talk about it for a long time, but it'll just be me repeating myself. But I appreciate you all tuning in. Again, maybe I'm just not getting it podcast. Follow me Instagram RTD underscore III, Facebook Robert Trey Davis III. Podcast is on Spotify, Apple Music, and iHeartRadio. I really appreciate y'all. I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.